Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Hoopsville. I'm your host, Dave McHugh, and I hope you are enjoying the basketball season. It is, once again, hectic and crazy, and to say the least. Of course, there is plenty to talk about, and we will do our best to cover it here on Hoopsville. If you got questions for us for our entire show or throughout the season, you can always email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. That's, of course, for our mailbag segment. Should we get enough questions, we will have a mailbag segment at the end of the show. If not, we will get you those answers on a future date. Of course, those are also for our podcast members when they get the opportunity to tune in. We hope you will. Podcast members, make sure you get a chance to download the show via SoundCloud or iTunes and email us your questions. We'll answer them on a future show, including tonight's. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville. Email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. Join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville. We're actually tweeting as we speak. We are on the air live. Join us as we chat about some conference surprises. Watch live. That's how you get it done. We hope you will watch us live as we hit the air here on this Thursday evening. Don't forget, we are on the air Thursdays and Sundays, starting at 7 o'clock Eastern Time each and every time. That's how we interact with you and how we continue to follow Division III basketball. Don't forget, 2 weeks from today, we will have our Hoopsville Marathon show. It will certainly keep us busy, 12 hours at least of basketball, and we hope you'll enjoy chatting with us with that. It includes plenty of guests, and we will have updates on that when we get them. Stay tuned to Hoopsville, especially on Twitter, for more information on the Hoopsville Marathon show. It'll also coincide with our fundraising efforts. We hope by the end of the weekend with Sunday's show, we will debut those fundraising efforts. We keep getting asked every year to continue it as people want to give back to our show. We consider the show kind of like public television. What you give allows us to do the show better. Case in point, NCAA Convention is taking place as we speak, and if you might remember, the last 2 years we've been at the NCAA Convention. We obviously are not there today. Reason being, quite simple. Couldn't afford to do it. Also because a lot of legislation wasn't sexy, interesting, fascinating to go and spend a few days there. It is certainly valuable to go there and do it. I don't think the legislation warranted it this year. We have one piece of legislation that is talking about evaluating recruits at camps. It's a little complicated, but basically, as long as a recruit is paying full price, I believe that at summer camps you can evaluate those student athletes for the future, almost try them out, as it were, which you're not allowed to do at any other time. Obviously outside of recruiting and seeing them play, as it is. That will get some pressure. That will take some conversation. I don't know which way that will go. I've heard both sides of the argument. I can understand both sides of the argument. Otherwise, not a lot of super duper interesting topics for legislation. So we decided not to go this year. Of course, we're regretting it. It's in Nashville. The other thing is there's not a lot of Division III schools around Nashville. I think Fisk might be the only one. And as a result, we wouldn't be able to see any basketball games, wouldn't really get a lot out of the trip, et cetera, et cetera. So didn't go this year. We hope to go back next year. I believe next year it's in Indianapolis and the following year in Orlando. A lot of donations that you give us allow us to go do those, but that's not the only thing we are able to do. We wanted to spend some of our money this year kind of updating the studio. We have some things to still hang in the studio before the marathon show starts. We want to get those hung. There's costs involved with that. We also, want to get other things done, including upgrading some of the hardware that we do the show in, and obviously when we go to Salem. So that's part of the fundraising efforts. We will hopefully get that up and running. We're looking at different avenues to try and do that, and we'll get that going. So I've rambled enough. Let's talk about the Division III. Well, let's talk about the guests coming up on the show. We always seem to bury that. Let's talk about the guests coming up. In women's basketball, we'll talk to the number 25 team in the country, the Messiah women's basketball team. Mike Miller will join us on the show. One loss came just less than a week ago to Albright in conference action. MAC Commonwealth looks certainly pretty interesting. We'll talk to Mike Miller about the conference. We'll also talk about the resurgence of the Falcons. And then we'll switch to men's basketball. We'll head up to Canton, New York, and talk to the St. Lawrence men's basketball team. Talk about another team that's come out of nowhere and thrust themselves into the top of the Liberty League ahead of Skidmore right now by the fact that they haven't lost, and Skidmore has one loss in conference. We'll talk to him. The two teams have not played, but St. Lawrence is certainly playing very well. 12 wins. They haven't had more than 14 wins since 2010. And they've already got 12, so good things on the horizon for the Saints. We'll talk about how that developed. Then we'll head out to the Great Lakes and Hanover. Their men's basketball team may be showing up a year earlier than maybe many expected. Third place predicted in the conference. They're sitting in first. Certainly playing well. How well? We'll talk to their head coach about their youth and what has changed with the Panthers. John Miller will join us on the show. And then we'll head to Minnesota. Talk to Bethel. The Royals were in first place when we booked them. They have fallen to a three-way tie for second in the MIAC due to 2 straight losses and 3 out of the last 5 games. However, I don't think the Bethel is out of it. We'll talk to Coach Novak about several subjects. The team, the conference. Also talk to him about why he chose to come to Bethel. He's a former tennis player at Tennessee, after all. And we'll talk to him about a choice he made at assistant coach. That is fascinating and should happen more often. All of that coming up here on the show, including the Hoopsville mailbag. If we get enough questions, email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Let's take a look at the top 25. And obviously the top 25 is a topic of conversation all the time. Men's top 25 and women's top 25 surprisingly did not have a lot of turnover this year. Or this week, despite the number of losses that took place. And I think that had to do with a lot of the fact that the losses took place at the top and the middle. So the bottom kind of absorbed a lot of teams that were losing. On the men's side, so far, we've only had 2 losses on the week. St. Norbert lost to Ripon. Ripon kind of punched him in the nose to start the game and went on easily to win 81-55. That's St. Norbert's first loss in the Midwest Conference in forever. That's a significant win for Ripon, who may now get some extra love. They've been in and out of the receiving votes category. By the way, the men's top 25, the receiving votes category is trimmed down considerably. That might have been where a lot of the voters changed things last week. With all those losses, they consolidated their ballots just a little bit. North Park took another loss. They entered the top 10 and proceeded to lose on Monday to non-conference foe Manchester, who beat him 89-77. We'll talk about Manchester's interesting week later in the show quickly. But North Park now 13-3 will fall out of the top 10. We'll see how far they fall, but certainly an interesting result there. No other losses the rest of the way, though almost every single team has played. And in fact, of North Park, they played twice and beat Milliken 89-61 last night. That is Wednesday night. Receiving votes category, Endicott lost again to Roger Williams. So now even I, as a voter for Endicott, am going to have to reconsider what's going on there. Bethel, as we mentioned, has lost 2 in a row. They got Hamlin coming up this weekend. We'll talk to their head coach. MIT lost to Babson in a game. Fascinating enough, MIT led at halftime over Babson, and then Babson opened up a can in the second half, shooting 18 of 23 to walk away, essentially, from MIT 71-65. But considering how far back Babson came in that game, no surprise at the result. So it might look like a tight score, but Babson almost seemed like they were toying with MIT. They are just that good. And then Carthage lost to Carroll. So Carthage, who was getting exactly 1 vote in 25th spot, will probably fall out of the top 25 now as a result. So some surprises there on the men's side and some non-surprises. On the women's side, there's actually been more losses in the top 25. 8, 9, and 10 took losses last night, though at least one of them expected, maybe 2. Wartburg lost their second game of the season to Luther, 66-61. They got Nebraska Wesleyan coming up. That's a bit of a surprise for Wartburg, maybe looking ahead on their schedule. Mary Washington lost, though. They lost to the team ranked 3 spots ahead of him. Christopher Newport, 75-67, 50-plus free throws in that game. As Gordon Mann said to myself and others, that's a prototypical Capital Athletic Conference women's basketball game. And he's right. They like to pound it and get aggressive. But that's Mary Washington's first loss. Christopher Newport stays undefeated at 16-0. I don't see Mary Washington falling very far there. They do have a pesky York squad coming up this weekend, so hopefully Mary Washington avoids losing 2 in a row. Oshkosh surprisingly lost to Whitewater. Whitewater is ranked number 20, Oshkosh number 10, but I just expected Oshkosh to be in more control there. They pick up their second loss as a result, 55-50, and have River Falls coming up this weekend. Whitewater remains with just 1 loss with that win and will have Stout coming up this weekend. And then Trine, all the way down there at 24, lost to number 7, Hope, 76-65. If anything, that might solidify Trine's spot on the top 25. In those receiving votes, Dallas is struggling a little bit, taking their third loss to Mary Hardin Baylor, 63-49. Hopefully they can right the ship against East Texas Baptist and Louisiana College this weekend. Bluffton lost to Defiance in double overtime, 79-75. Ithaca lost to Stevens, 74-43. A surprising result for Ithaca there. Babson lost to number 1 Tufts, 60-46. No surprise there at all. And Illinois Wesleyan, I should say, picked up their 6th loss of the season, this time to Augustana, 89-73. So some surprises there. A little bit on the women's side, but I think the fact that Illinois Wesleyan picking up their 6th loss is certainly a surprise to me. By the way, speaking of overtime games, triple overtime game yesterday, Ursinus versus Muhlenberg. Ursinus eventually won the game in triple overtime. That is a lot of basketball. Certainly kept everybody interested. Great article on the front about Ursinus, about how they decided not to go out there for the best players, but find the best team players and how that is working out for the Bears so far this season. Lots of good articles on the front page. By the way, St. Orbert's winning streak, I mentioned that earlier, 72 games in conference. Excuse me. So pretty long stretch, to say the least. Other articles on the front page, Case Western Reserve women are featured. We also feature Josh Ruggles of Loris, heart surgery, a world record holder, and now a basketball player, his story. And then Amherst finding, quote, inspiration abroad in, I believe it was Puerto Rico or Costa Rica. It was Costa Rica. Talking about a couple players who went to Costa Rica. So great articles on D3Hoops.com. Check out the All Regions. Check out the All Around the Nation. That Around the Nation should come out later tonight or tomorrow. Ryan catches up with a bunch of former Division III players who have played professional ball and talking about the experiences of doing that. That is coming up on our website, D3Hoops.com. in the near future. By the way, Buena Vista came from 14 down in the last 5 minutes to beat Co last night, 62-61. That was one of those other results that I spotted last night. Keep an eye on the scoreboard tonight. So I think Elms is playing Southern Vermont, I believe, getting going in that game. We'll keep an eye on the scoreboard throughout and to see what's going on around the country. So again, we got lots of guests coming up, and we got lots of topics to discuss. If you got questions for us, email us. Hoopsville at d3hoops.com. We'll get them into the mailbag segment. And also coming up, we have, or you can tweet us, is what I should say, at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can also email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. For those who are just joining us on the podcast, I just hit the record button, so I apologize. Record now underway. A lot of what I talked about at the beginning we'll talk about at the end again as well, but again, the top 25, certainly interesting. I don't think we saw as much turnover in the top 25 as we normally do on the men's side. I don't have a really good reason for that, except for most likely, like I said earlier, and those of you on the podcast, I apologize for missing this, the fact that I think that the bottom and the middle absorbed a lot of the losses at the top and the middle. We lost Swarthmore, and Swarthmore had a horrible week, and we lost Illinois Wesleyan out of the top 25 on the men's side, and we reduced our number of teams being voted probably in half. Guilford's sitting number 26. They're a team I'm certainly high on. Illinois Wesleyan is in the 27th spot. Lycoming's in there. They're certainly having an interesting season. Swarthmore then fell to that spot. Hardin-Simmons, team I'm watching out of the AFC. Endicott, as we mentioned, of course, lost Hope's in there. I'm voting for Hope, and I'm surprised more people aren't. Bethel, as we mentioned, though, they may lose all of their votes, sadly, after their 2 losses in 3 of the last 5. MIT, we'll see what happens. Hanover, Brockport Catholic, and Carthage. I actually saw Catholic last night, and not to be too critical, but it wasn't anything to write home about. Granted, playing my alma mater, Goucher. Goucher did beat Scranton, but they weren't the same team against Catholic. Catholic's a good team, not stellar, not top 25 as we have been accustomed to. They're good. They got some youth that are going to probably make that squad pretty dangerous in the next couple of years. But this year, kind of more ho-hum. I think the landmark as a whole, the top is down a little bit, is a little bit more ho-hum. Moravian beat Scranton. Scranton's now lost 2 in a row in the landmark on the men's side, which is surprising. So we'll see how this all plays out. But, I did see Catholic. They're okay. Again, nothing that blows me away about them. They are young, but they do have some good shooters, and they got some decent inside presence. We'll see how it all plays out. Going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk to, speaking of the Mid-Atlantic, women's basketball, and talk Messiah Falcons women's basketball. Mike Miller will join us, talk about his squad, and just how good are they with just 1 loss. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. We'll be back with more Hoopsville after this.
My name is Marcus Walker. I was All-State, won a state championship, a high school All-American, and played college and pro ball. I played because I love the game. I grind to be the best. I sweat because I put in work. I'm strong because I believe. When I want to bring it before game time, I come to the house that college basketball built, the CBE. No matter your skill, take it to another level. Elevate your game right here at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center.
I'm a Division III student athlete, and I know how powerful words can be. The term gay doesn't mean stupid, lame, or less than.
So I pledge to speak up if I hear the term gay used in a derogatory way or any other homophobic terms.
If you can play in Division III.
I'm a Division III student athlete, and my teammates unconditionally accepted me as part of their family. So now I pledge to do the same for others. If you can play in Division III.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.D3Hoops.com.
Great moments are born from great opportunity. That's what you have here tonight. That's what you've earned here tonight. This is your time. Now go out there and take it.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you are enjoying the show. If you've got questions for us, remember, you can email us and join us in the Hoopsville mailbag at hoopsville@d3hoops.com. That's your email address, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Don't forget also to tweet us at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville, or join us on Facebook, where we are streaming the show live as well. Facebook Live. It is hoopsville@d3hoops.com. I'm sorry, that's the email address. It's facebook.com/Hoopsville. So talking women's basketball now, and jumping into a region which we kind of alluded to last week is just a little bit jam-packed. We talked to Catholic's women's basketball coach Matt Donahue about the fact that there's 3 or 4 teams in the Capital Athletic Conference, 3 or 4 teams in the Landmark Conference, 3 teams in the MAC Commonwealth Conference. Centennial might only have 1, maybe 2 worth talking about, but it makes for a lot of good women's teams, which is going to make the end of the season certainly fascinating. One of the reasons for that is Messiah has kind of returned to the fray, as it were. This is a team that had kind of fell back a little bit, but certainly kind of rejuvenated themselves as well. And so, you got to wonder what's causing the Falcons to fly so high. Well, the easiest way to find out is go to the City of Salem Hoopsville Skype hotline, and joining us there is Coach Mike Miller from the 25th ranked Falcons. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again, Dave.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time. First and foremost, again, I say, you guys, I wouldn't say certainly that you were having bad seasons, but you guys had kind of stepped back from the Albright-Stevenson fight, as it were, for a while. You're back in the fray. It's 3 teams deep, and you guys have only taken 1 loss so far. You're looking pretty darn good.
Yeah, I'm really pleased where we're at. It's the group I have. It's just a pleasure to work with. And I had you had me on last year in December, and I said, watch us in January. And our young kids just keep playing better. So and they just enjoy the process and enjoy the journey.
That's exactly what you said last year. I vividly remember bringing you on, and you said, watch for us in the second half of the season. And I kid you not, I'm watching going, you got to be kidding me. They're coming back. You guys made a bit of a decent run there on the conference a little bit at the end. Obviously, didn't make a deep run in the NCAA tournament or anything along those lines. But you did live up to the expectation, and clearly you're now rolling into this season in the same manner.
Right. Yeah. And last year definitely was a foundation. We knew what we had. Just a bunch of young players that really want to get better and want to bring Messiah back to prominence, if you will. They came to Messiah for that reason, and they've worked really hard in the off season, and to do it with players, no transfers, just players inside the program that just keep getting better and want to be better. It's a great way to do it.
So why were you so remind everybody why you were so confident a year ago, first semester, that this team would kind of almost wake up in the second semester, make this run, and be this good this year?
Okay, yeah, you had me on right. We were sitting 4-4 and just had a tough loss to Marymount. That night we had 2 junior captains just kind of after the game, just kind of really just kind of took over the basketball piece and wanted to change the culture. And they kind of led the way. And we were playing at that point a bunch of freshmen and sophomores. And we just kind of grew. And since that night, we've been 31-5 with some big wins over that stretch with Albright and Stevenson's and River Falls and Marymount. So we've done well, but it's really because the players just really bought in. We had some talent. We stayed healthy. As well, so that obviously helps. But just the kids, once we lost to Albright last year in our league championship game, they've they continued to commit themselves to wanting to be the best that they can be as a team.
Obviously, getting to Albright in the conference championship game, losing to them 69-58 is how the season ended. Yeah. But it included a win over Stevenson in the semifinals, 73-66. Except for basically a 3-game losing mark in 5 games right in the heart of that January-February. The team was on fire.
Right.
And as we mentioned, you continued it on. You beat Hopkins to start the season by 20. You beat Dickinson by 30. You beat Washington and Lee rather handily. Alvernia, you beat rather handily. You then went to Puerto Rico. I really feel horrible for you. And certainly got work done there. Then you came home, and this is when things got a little bit more difficult. You played Dickinson a second time, and it was pretty much the same result. Stevenson, then you had to survive at home, a last-second shot. Albright then trips you up, and then Lev Val takes you to overtime. Is there a little bit of maybe are we seeing basically the team maybe a little bit tired, or are we seeing the opponents going, okay, we figured you out a little bit?
Yeah, I think part of it. First of all, no excuse. Everybody's tired and everybody's dinged up, so yeah. That's never an excuse. I just think people, for one, we kind of lost our way defensively in the past week or two. Everything that we did in our program this year, except for a couple out of bounds plays, was brand new, like everything. And then I think including how we played our man defense, and we kind of lost our way. Had some slippage, and we just started giving up a lot of easy stuff. Here lately, and then being ranked and being undefeated, we're everybody's big game again, and we're still a little bit young, and I think understanding in league play, really understanding that the other team's doing 5 different things to try to slow you down and stop you, and you just gotta have to stay the process and keep fighting through the finish. So we're learning how to do that now. We had Stevenson in control of them, and they made a run on us, and we finished that off at the end. So great game with Albright, two great teams going at it. So, but we don't like giving up 85 points.
Yeah, no, that's not your prototypical way of doing things. That is
right,
for sure.
And we gave up 72 again last night to LVC. So, we worked on some things tonight, and there's really kind of great buy-in. We're switching some things up. But, we want to win with our defense, and that's kind of been slipping here lately. So that's really the number one reason I think, people are kind of catching up to us. And we'd have to get back to the process, so to speak.
Talking to Mike Miller, head coach of Messiah, the women's basketball team. Not too shabby at 16-1, sitting number 25 in the D3Hoops.com top 25. Coach, when I look at some other things, first off, you've got an interesting race in this conference. I alluded to it. Yet the Mid-Atlantic is jammed this year with good teams. And I would say that the MAC Commonwealth's at least 3 deep, yourselves, Albright, and Stevenson. And you could argue maybe 4 deep as there's others who are lurking, the Lycomings and the Lebanon Valleys of the world. Lycomings 10-6 and 4-4 in conference. Lev Val maybe 7-10, but they're 4-4. They're making it interesting. Right. What's going to happen to get through this conference and at least stay at the top when you still have a return trip with Stevenson on the road at their place? You've got a return trip against Albright. It's going to be at their place, plus everybody else you're going to have to play.
Right. Yeah, and then, we have a big one next week at Lycoming, so all 3 of those on the road, and I just like I said, I think it really has to get back to a swagger with our defense to go into games knowing that we have the ability to shut down people. We're going to find ways to score. We're very deep. We play a lot of people. Somebody each night figures out a way to put the ball in the basket. But we have to just get a little bit more swagger with our defense and just kind of trust what we're trying to do there. And I think Lev Valley, last night was the first time they had their group together all year. They've had injuries throughout the year, and they're going to be really solid. And then Stevenson had their second best player miss 5 games right during a tough stretch. So, you're right. It's going to be really interesting in the league.
You've been coaching for 31 years, Coach. This is your 31st season. Does it get old, or does it ever feel old, or does it always feel new?
Okay, great question. There has been like peaks and valleys, if you will, from that standpoint. A couple of years ago, it felt old. Do I really want to do this? And the kids seemed to change, and I wasn't ready for that.
Sure.
But and this is part of our success now. We really have a roster full that I would say are exceptions to the rule. Non-millennials, like they understand the value of work and they need to work and everything. If they want whatever they want to get, and they need to invest. So it's really rejuvenated me to know there's really these wonderful people out there and their families that they just want it all. And basketball is just part of that. But these kids are doing great in the classroom and in relationships and spiritually. And we happen to have a roster that and we have a bunch of young players, freshmen, sophomores. So I'm rejuvenated, and it'll be rejuvenated definitely for a few more years, because the kids I can't wait to get in the gym every day. And it's because of the players we get to coach.
Some certain things I assume also help you. Obviously with very successful soccer programs, I'm assuming the Messiah name can get out there a little bit. At the same time, your lacrosse programs and even field hockey and some other programs are starting to come along to do the same thing. It seems like basketball's coming along. Volleyball has certainly improved. It almost feels like in some way all the programs are kind of helping each other improve, and maybe that's helping recruiting. And obviously you have a niche, being a religious type school like Hope, like Calvin, like the Wheatons of the world. Does it all just kind of combine to a perfect storm that the recruits you're looking for, the ones that actually do want to come to Messiah?
Yeah, there is no doubt that I always look at these kind of things. What everybody has an advantage, a disadvantage, and you can't say poor as us, whatever it is. And our advantage is we have a specific niche. And that pool isn't very big, but then the ones we get really tend to be quality people. Yeah. They want things bigger than themselves. They're really great about being, involved in team sports. We don't have a whole lot of the problems I think a lot of schools have or inside their rosters. So there is definitely, that aspect. And when everybody does well, your name just gets out. It might be a sister of a soccer player, whatever it is. So there's no doubt about it that each program props up the next.
Let's talk about this team. You got 3 seniors on it. You kind of hinted last year it was the 3 juniors that kind of took the reins of the program. It is those 3 seniors this year who continue the way. Though only one of them is leading in the stat category. Now that's Jillian Glacken, certainly a very good player. 12.9 points a game, 8.2 rebounds a game, hands out and assists a game. About a block and a half a game too. Not too shabby. Almost 2 blocks a game, really. Obviously, she's the linchpin on the floor, clearly. But I know there's more players involved. Tell us a little bit about her game, but how everybody else kind of plays off of her.
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, Gillian's a special person and talent. One of the things that, first of all, she'll do anything that we ask her to do. She's 6'2", and we have a 6'2" sophomore, Alicia Rohr, and for us to play them together, especially at the to level Division III, like Gillian has had to guard point guards and 2 guards and the best 3 spot and things like that. And she has that kind of versatility and has grown into that. She's not just a center. So that's one piece. So she can guard, say we're about defense, and she can guard anybody. So that allows us to use our depth more and play more people and just get people more involved, because we're not just trying to play forwards or centers or things like that. And in addition to that, many of our players on other rosters, we're playing 10 players a night. They were double digits and minutes. And like Gillian has really good numbers, but she's not, she's choosing to, even in her senior year, that on other teams, she'd be playing 30, 35 minutes a night, and she's doing 23, 24 for us because she knows what it's going to take to get to the NCAAs, to win a conference championship, and our whole roster needs to be involved. Mm-hmm. And like, just her leadership in that aspect too. Like, she's everybody's biggest fan when she's on the bench. And again, that whole wanting something bigger than yourself, that Gillian really represents that well.
Well, and you mentioned, Gillian being inside at 6'2", and Rohr, who's third on the team at 11 points a game, 6.5 rebounds at 6'2". In between them is Macy Thornton, a sophomore, 12.5 points a game, 3.1 assists a game. That trio right there, you've got a guard who can shoot, who can also pass. You've got 2 inside. You can call it a 2-headed monster. You can call it Twin Towers, whatever you want to call. You also have Caitlin Hoff, by the way, at 10 points a game and 8.5 from Jen Fairbanks. You've got a lot of weapons, and when you've got 2 inside on the blocks, that makes it really hard for defenses who probably have, one tall, significant player. They're going to have to put someone small in the other one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's and we're still, and this is the first time in my 31 years we've had 2 legitimate post players. So we're still working on that to get better spacing and how to utilize them. So we're
Hurry up, Gillian leaves this year.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I hear you. So, it's been interesting. We have a couple of different offenses, different sets, things like that, to make sure we get people certain touches, depending on how the game's going. But the fact that we have a lot of people that can score 20 on a given night, it's and that's what happened early. People just started the year we're just doubling. We got to just stop the inside game, and for one level, one point, maybe after 7 or 8, 10 games, we were leading the nation in 3-point shooting percentage, because everybody was just standing wide open. And teams have adjusted to that. So it's now, it's a little bit harder. You have to read more, and that's what the kids are kind of figuring out, really, to be calm enough to see where the doubles are coming, or, the hedges and things like that. And they're starting to really get it.
I look through the stat lines and some things that jump out. You're shooting 45% from the floor, 36% from beyond the arc, and nearly 80% from the free throw line. There would be coaches who'd kill for that third number. You're out-rebounding your opponents by 5 a game, and then you're outscoring your opponents. You're scoring nearly 77 points a game, and you're holding opponents to 54. So while you said recently the defense has struggled, is there any other flaw? Is there anything that you guys don't do well that the numbers don't really indicate?
And I would just throw in there our turnover margin. Like, our rebounding is excellent because of our turnover budget. We're even a +7 there, so we don't get an opportunity to rebound as much. No, I honestly, we need to. The biggest thing we're working on right now, besides some defensive rotations and things like that and spacing, we don't talk well. We don't really talk and communicate on the court as well as we need to on both ends and transition D, and we're really working on that. That would be the one that we have a lot of players who just work hard and are very quiet. They're do anything. And they're be in a weight room or take 1,000 shots or do whatever, but to get them to talk, just kind of laugh at them at times. So But that communication piece, but they're really, in the past week, they've really worked on that, even just last night in the second half. Because the two people that we had, Gillian Glackett and Kate Hoff, are the two that talk the most and just lead and just direct. They both got in early foul trouble and didn't play in the first half. And we had a hard time in the first half. And the second half, after I challenged them, everybody started talking, communicating. We played better. So even that's, it's all work in progress. That's where it gets fun, just to be quite honest with you, to pick out things and try to keep getting better and not worry about the wins and where that next game is.
Friend of the program for you emailed me a question, and it's a good one in the sense that, you guys have some changes ahead of you. The new athletic facility will be coming along, which means you're going to have to shift gyms just a little bit. But you got to be excited that you're getting you're getting a new gym. You're going to be getting a new look. This is the exciting times, especially when you can get something maybe state of the art. How excited are you?
Yeah, we're really excited. Men's basketball coach and I, for part of it is we don't have a great practice situation. So we're going to get a new gym, but we're also getting, they're redoing a gym, but they're adding 2 more courts to practice as well.
Yeah.
You practice, you only play 13 home games, but you practice 75 times.
Right.
But that practice, that classroom setting and for practice, we're so thrilled about that. And we're getting our own state-of-the-art team room that we'll have all year round. And obviously, we're going to get a new gym with a drop-down scoreboard and a high-def big screen thing. And it's going to be really, really nice. But it all started with, we're getting a brand new wellness center is how all this started.
Yeah.
So we don't really have a wellness center, so that's going to be great for recruiting and for the college in general too. But yeah, we're excited about it. Looking forward to it for sure.
You're at win 583 for your career. Simple math would say that, unless I'm completely off, win 600 would have to come next year anyway. So I suspect you'll stick around for that if you can, and I suspect you'll stick around for the new gym if you can.
Oh, yeah. I'm not, So any recruits out there listening, I'm not going anywhere. No, it goes back to that question. I'm really, really enjoying it. This group the last couple of years I've really been rejuvenated. I love what I'm doing, and I love working with these kids and their families. It's just really a pleasure and a joy. I wish everybody would get to do what I get to do. Just really enjoy, and the people I get to work with. I get to pick who I get to work with. Not everybody gets to do that. So these players are great.
Well, you're a far cry from that 13-13 season. It seems like you're right back on track for what we are accustomed to from Messiah. Obviously, a great season despite the one loss to Albright. Lycoming, as you mentioned, coming up. Good luck the rest of the season, Coach. I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us. As always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Just heard a little bit about the fundraising. If you have a couple extra bucks, send it their way. They do great work, and it's from the heart. They're following their passion, so let's support these guys.
Well, thank you, Coach. I appreciate it. Good luck the rest of the way, and I look forward to maybe even getting up there for a game.
I'd love to have you. Let me know if you're coming.
I will indeed, sir. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Mike Miller joining us here on the City of Salem Skype hotline. We appreciate him taking the time. Again, Lycoming coming up on the road. Then they're at home against Arcadia, then on the road against Stevenson, Alvernia, and Widener. Then home against Leadville, home against Wood, and closing out on the road against Albright. There is a lot of basketball ahead and some big games for Messiah and big games for the MAC Commonwealth on the women's side. It is going to be a great race in the Mid-Atlantic region. I cannot stress that enough. The landmark's going to be fun to watch. The CAC, which we saw Christopher Newport versus Mary Washington last night, that is going to be fun to watch. And it's going to be fun to watch the Landmark Conference, the MAC Commonwealth, as I mentioned, the CAC. Centennial might be the only one that's not going to be thrilling, but Haverford and Muhlenberg will be battling it out at the top of that conference as well. It is going to be fascinating when it comes to selection time. Who gets left out? Because I can't imagine they all can get in. Some good teams out of this region are going to be left home on the women's side. We'll see who that ends up being. Thanks to Coach Miller yet again, Coach Mike Miller. We'll have Coach John Miller coming up in a couple of segments from Hanover. But in the meantime, thanks to Mike Miller at Messiah. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll switch into some men's basketball. We'll head up to Canton, New York, and talk St. Lawrence men's basketball. Then we'll head to Ohio to talk Hanover men's basketball. And then we'll head out to Minnesota and talk Bethel men's basketball. That's all still ahead, plus the Hoopsville mailbag. If you got a question for us, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. We'll talk more about the fundraiser as well and the NCAA Convention. That's all coming up here on the show. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by d3hoops.com from the WBCA NABC studios. More Hoopsville right after this.
I used to never really talk. Ever. I was afraid if I said something wrong, everyone would laugh at me. But then I started to play golf with Special Olympics. It helped me to find my voice. And now everyone else is speechless.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
Cheer for the stumbles. The he shoulda had that's. And the tears that linger. For in those moments, greatness lies. There, you will find the provoked, the determined, the unified. It's in those moments that champions are born.
We are calling you, all of you. We are calling all Division III schools to join our cause.
It's on us to start the change. It's on us to be the change. It's on us. It's on Division III. It's on all of us to stop sexual assault.
All right. 3, 2, 1. And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you enjoyed our Thursday night show. Don't forget, in 2 weeks, believe it or not, it is 2 weeks away. We will be on air for 12 plus hours. It's the Hoopsville Marathon Show. Get your tickets today. Well, not really. Just make sure you tune in. It will be part of our fundraising efforts, which we hope to launch here momentarily as well this week, and plenty more. Obviously, it's also our way of getting everybody ready for the final month of the regular season and ahead of regional rankings and all that stuff. So heads up, the Hoopsville Marathon is 2 weeks away from tonight. We'll talk more about it at the end of the show as well. You got questions for us? Don't forget the Hoopsville mailbag segment's coming up as well. If we have questions, we'll answer them. But you got to email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. You got to send them to us. Of course, that's also for those who may not be listening to the show live. If that is the case, send them to us so we can answer them down the road as well and get you your answers on a later show. Of course, you can also tweet us at D3Hoopsville or use the hashtag Hoopsville. You can also join us on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville, and of course, Instagram at D3Hoopsville and hashtag Hoopsville as well. You're going to switch into some men's basketball at this time. Talk about, and we're going to go up into the East region, and there's several teams in the East region, especially on the men's side, that we've considered trying to talk to, but for whatever varying reasons, we've talked to somebody else or talked to a women's team or whatever. So our list on the men's side continues to get longer. Well, it's going to keep waiting because another team that jumped out at me in the last 2 weeks is St. Lawrence. If you haven't noticed, they are 12-2 on the season and 5-0 in Liberty play. This is a conference that Skidmore has certainly gotten the most attention from the last few years. They might be outshadowed by the Saints this season. The 12 wins nearly equals the total from the last 2 seasons. The last time they had more than 14 wins in a season, you got to go back to 2010. And maybe this is the year we're going to see it again. Saints are having a tremendous year, but what's it all mean and how's it all happened? Well, that's why we've got this show. We go to the Hoopsville Hotline, presented by the City of Salem, and joining us there is Chris Downs, head coach for St. Lawrence men's basketball. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville.
Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Hi, I'm well. Appreciate you taking the time. 12-2. This is one heck of a start. Your only losses are to Amherst and Brockport. You got a couple overtime games in there as well. You've had a couple high-scoring affairs to add to the excitement. Honestly, this is the type of season you thought you guys would start out at?
To be honest with you, Dave, it's not really. Maybe not 12-2, but we thought we really were poised to have a pretty good year. We finished last year in the conference championship game and lost by a couple of points on the road and really had a chance to win that game. With the last second three and just weren't ready at that time to take the shot, but we've got we got a real senior-oriented backcourt, guys that have had the ball in their hands since they were freshmen, and have done a really nice job taking care of it. And we've got improved play out of a junior in Riley Niclario and a sophomore big kid in Ben Crawford. So no, we're feeling like we're about where we should be.
Yeah, that conference championship game obviously isn't the way you want it to end. It also, you lost 5 of your last 8. Of course, 2 of your last 3 were to Skidmore, that team we talked about being so good. So it's an interesting finish going into the year, but you certainly were strong ahead of that. You actually had a really good middle of the season to finish at 14-12. When you look at what you've done to start, and granted the Amherst game, 90-68, is going to stick out a little bit like a sore thumb. But the Brockport loss obviously was tight. But you've also beaten some good teams. You've beaten Oswego State, who many thought were going to have a really good season this year. You've got wins over Ithaca. You've got Johnson and Wales, who obviously is a little bit different than they were last year, and some other squads on this schedule that you've beaten, and some you've beaten pretty dominantly. You guys are just kind of quietly lurking in this East region right now.
Well, I appreciate that, and I do think we are quietly just going about our business. I do think our guys are playing with a little chip on their shoulder. We don't, not many people talk about us at 12-2, and so I do think they come to practice every day. They also recognize that, it's been a few years since we've been, in 2010 we were in the Sweet 16, but It's been a few years, and so now we have to be the hunted or the hunter, and Skidmore is the hunted, and we know every night that that we've got to go out and give people our best game, and so they're excited to do that. They're taking nothing for granted, and they recognize that last year we had a few slip-ups. We lost to some teams that were not particularly good teams, and it cost us a chance to host a game at home, and they're determined not to let that happen.
You've got obviously senior leadership in 4 players who are seniors on this squad, which obviously can help. Leadership is certainly important, but it's a junior leading the way scoring-wise at nearly 20 points a game, 19.1 points a game, 7 rebounds a game from Riley. Is it Niclario? Niclario. I wasn't even close. Sorry, Riley. Riley Niclario, again, 19 points a game, and he's a junior for you. Kyle Edwards, 15.2 a game, and Wiley Zachary at 13 points a game. Those are the other 2 guys in double figures. Obviously, Zachary is a senior as well, and I believe, Edwards is a senior. So you've got a kind of a little bit of a mix here. You've got senior leadership, obviously 2 of them in your double figure category, but then you've got a junior as well who's kind of taking a brunt of the load, as it were.
Yeah, Riley really has developed. It came after the end of the season last year. He's a guy who had a chance to make a big play, in the conference final against Skidmore. And we talked about it after the game was over, that he wasn't ready to take that shot. He wasn't mature enough. He wasn't, poised enough. And he needed to have an off season where he really worked to improve his game. He had a somewhat spotty spring, I think. He wasn't around. I didn't see him around the gym much. He was out golfing a lot, and so we sat down and we talked about, hey, what exactly are your goals? What exactly do you want to do? And he, basically said that he was, wanted to be this, and so we talked to him about the things he needed to do. He stayed up here last summer. He worked in our admissions office as an admissions ambassador, which is a fabulous internship for him. And he worked on his game, and so he's done that, and he's come back. He's 15 to 20 pounds bigger. He's stronger. He decided he wasn't going to just shoot jump shots, that he was going to round out his game by being a more interior-oriented, inside-outside guy, and he's part of the reason that we've taken a little bit of a step here, is that he's come along nicely.
And again, then two other guys who are nearly in double figures at 9+ points a game, if that makes any sense. One's a senior and one's a sophomore. So obviously there's a little bit of that senior leadership, but to hear that story of Riley stepping up on occasion, it almost seems like that's part of what this team has done. Again, guys have been hovering or just over 500 the last few years. It's been a while since we've seen an even 16-game winning season from this program. And what was the moment that the light switch went on, as it were?
Well, I think it started, to be honest with you, I think it started when these kids arrived. I think the culture at St. Lawrence got away from me a little bit as the coach when, 4 or 5 years ago. I had some kids at home and was spending more time at home than I was, recruiting and working on our team. And, the culture was bad. The guys that were here were not as driven and dedicated. And then we got this this group of seniors now, and they bought in, and we decided we were going to give them the ball, and we were going to live with mistakes. And we decided, we were going to give them minutes. All those guys are going to play in 100+ games before they're done, and we just decided, we're going to live with it. So for the next few years, we kind of took our lumps and grew and got better, and they changed the culture. It's much better now. It's actually at a very high level here right now, so that's been great to see. The underclassmen we have here are great, and they're going to be able to keep us at a pretty good level, I think, beyond just this season. But I think this year some big wins were, to be able to beat Plattsburgh, who we always think is a very good team, and be able to beat Ithaca and do both of those pretty soundly. I think that kind of sparked this group to think, hey, maybe we got a little something here. We were overwhelmed at Amherst. We didn't play our best basketball at Amherst. But after the game, Coach Hickson, who is a wonderful guy, said, you got a nice team, Chris. And they didn't play their best tonight, and we played pretty well. But you got a nice team, and you're going to have a good year. And that I thought was really nice of him to say, because he didn't have to. They had put it to us pretty good that night.
Well, that's an interesting statement. I was going to say, how do you then not have that demoralize you? And this is not a shot at SUNY Canton, who we know is also a program in development. They obviously were your next opponent, and maybe the perfect opponent for you, but that was a nip-and-tuck game, 95-81. Canton is certainly improving. How'd you keep a thoroughly handed game that you were on the receiving end on, keep this from derailing things immediately? Because I've seen that happen a lot.
Yeah, I think that's the senior leadership. I think I think when they go in the locker room and say, "Boys, we're okay." Like, one loss doesn't kill us. We've got to now go back, take a look at what we didn't do well, and let's regroup and have better practices. And I can only think of a time or two this year where we haven't had good practice. And I think that's because our seniors come every day and help those guys focus. And so I think they just got them refocused and recognized right after Thanksgiving that we had another game to go, and we started back up with Canton.
Another interesting quirk of the schedules, right after that Amherst game, you played 4 at home against Canton and Plattsburgh State in late November, and then Ithaca and Elmira in early December, and then you went pretty much the month of December before playing again when you got into conference play on the road. And then the last 4 games have all been on the road. It's been an interesting schedule, as it were, this season, and that is a long break in December.
If interesting's a synonym for terrible,
okay,
then that is what it is. But a month off, a month off is awful. Coming back on the 26th of December to play on the 30th is awful. To have to play on the road during break and be here living in the dorms and living in the hotel and, for 3 or 4 weeks before students get back is terrible. That's the glamour stuff they don't tell you about Division III basketball, but these guys, we did a lot of stuff. We tried to do things together by going to movies and having pool tournaments and playing cards, and we tried to keep them occupied all the time, practicing and shooting and getting a routine. And it is in Division III a little bit tougher because everything is driven financially. And so, you have to kind of go with go with the flow, and if you get too wound up, this isn't a good level for you.
We'll add into your terrible analogy playing conference games on December 30th and 31st.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, at least on the 31st, a lot of people see 31st as a holiday to imbibe, and so it was nice to have our guys. We knew right where they were. They were on the bus with us.
Yeah, exactly. But we won't get into the whole conversation of the fact that you're playing conference games on the 30th and 31st. Or maybe it'll be the perfect conversation for a question I've got later. But before I get to that, obviously conference play. Skidmore, as I had said, has been kind of the focal point of this conference for several years. They've held the banner into the NCAA tournament, into the second round a few times. They're actually 6-1. They've won one more game than you have, but they've got that loss, which puts you guys in first place. You guys have not played them yet. Obviously, you've got your first game coming up on the 24th, and then you'll finish the season with them at home. After that, Hobart is lurking at 8-6, 3-2. You've got them coming up on the schedule. RPI's got a 10-6 mark. Rochester Tech's got a 9-6 mark, but they're all behind you in the conference. What do we make of the conference race this season?
Well, the conferences, and I said this last year. Last year the conference, there was a lot of parity and a lot of mediocrity.
Yeah.
This year there's a lot of parity, but there's a lot of good teams. And so, you look at how our teams did outside the conference this year against other conferences, and we've had a nice run. So the teams in our league are good. It's anybody's right now to win. There's a long way to go. I think until somebody takes Skidmore down, they're the champs, and until somebody takes them down, they're the favorite as far as we can tell.
Per the conference, per the scheduling, this is a conference in flux. As I joked with Skidmore's head coach at the beginning of the year, it almost feels like you guys in the basketball side are just pawns in this entire game as football tries, and who knows if they are ever successful, to hold on to an automatic bid after quite a bit of movement. How hard is that for you as a coach to not know, A, how many games you might be playing, when the conference could expand to another team, if it may not expand to another team, if anybody decides, forget it, we're done, and bolt? How difficult has this been just to be a bystander, essentially?
It's not as difficult as you think from my perspective, because I really don't have a say in it. So I don't get too wound up or worked up about what they're going to do, at the administrative level. I'm going to play whoever they tell me. We've got now Ithaca joining our conference next year.
Right.
They certainly make us stronger academically. They make us stronger athletically. And so far as I can tell, a rising tide raises all boats. And so we're excited to get them on board. And we also are in southern Canada here at St. Lawrence. And so we have a harder time scheduling.
Yeah.
So for us, having 18 conference games and me only have to find, 7 non-conference games, 5 after I get my tip-off, that makes my scheduling job not that hard. I can go out and play the Oswegos and the Brockports and really try to challenge ourselves, non-conference wise.
But on that token, not knowing, obviously Ithaca comes in next year, but you don't know what the following year may or may not bring. Is that hard to try and schedule when I know you're looking that far in advance, when you just don't know what you've gotten out of conference scheduling?
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does make it difficult. But again, I've been doing it now quite a while, and so we just kind of just go with the flow with it and see what, wait and see what's going to happen. And there's a lot of conversations that before it hits the general public, there's a lot of conversations in-house about this is leaning that way. You might want to think about, trying to line up another game or dumping somebody. And so we just kind of listen to what's going on and go from there.
The next, next 2 are at home. 4 of the next 5 are at home. Then the season wraps up with 3-3, 3 home and 3 away.
Right.
Kind of a theme of this show has been, what's the message to the team moving forward? Because we're kind of in that weird mid-season where things can kind of grind down a little bit, or the team can wear out, as you said, trying to keep them interested in Southern Canada while school's not in session. So what is the message to the team in the locker room or in pregame as you get ready to play RIT coming up on this weekend along with Hobart and for the rest of the season for that matter.
Yeah, we looked at that 7-game stretch that you talked about right after Christmas as a critical stretch for us. It was 7 games, 6 of them were on the road, and 1 was against a crosstown rival in Clarkson. So we looked at that, and we did some things, and came up with we made that its own little season, and we had a goal for that part of the season, and we were able to achieve that. And so now we look at 7 of 11 at home, and and this is a time where we're going to have to see if we can protect our home court and play better in front of our crowd and hopefully get some momentum going because, as you pointed out, I don't point it out to our players, but we didn't finish as strong last year as we needed to. And this year, I think in my head, we've got to really focus on one game at a time, being hungry. We say around here we're playing for the conference championship every night. And we're not waiting until the last week of the season against Skidmore to be thinking like that. Like, we know that every game matters, and we're going to play like that every night.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time to join us. I'm fascinated to see how the rest of the way goes. I'd love to tell you I'm going to get to Southern Canada to see a game, but I'm not all that confident right now. But someday I'm going to get up to Canton and see some games. But I do wish you luck the rest of the way. As always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Yeah, Dave. I mean, we do have great coverage. High def coverage online every night when we're playing. Doesn't cost you anything. So if you can tune in or your listeners can tune in and watch us, we appreciate anybody. But thanks for all you do for Division III basketball. The stuff you guys put up on the web, the statistics, the way you cover it, the way you talk to the coaches, and you have a real positive impact on, a lot of kids. There's 420-something Division III schools, and I'll tell you what, there's 15 kids on every team on average, and they all are checking your website and paying attention, and what you're doing for that many kids is really special year after year. So thanks for that.
Well, thank you, Coach. Appreciate the kind words. Good luck. Stay warm. Don't get bored with the card games, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, thanks again.
Absolutely.
All right.
Chris Downs joining us on the City of Salem's Skype, or the City of Salem regular hotline. I don't know what I was trying to say there. Again, they having a great season, 12-2 and 5-0 in conference play. As he mentioned, 7 of their next 11 are at home, including 4 of their next 5. RIT and Hobart this weekend, Skidmore in the middle of the week, and then RPI on the road, and then RPI and Union the following weekend at home. Keep an eye on the Saints. I think we're going to see some surprises out of the East in a lot of ways. Rochester has been a surprise, and not necessarily a surprise, but how long they've went undefeated. And there's going to be some other surprises, and the Saints are up there. And Skidmore looks like they're going to have a much tougher opponent at the top of the conference than maybe they anticipated at the beginning of the season, but who knows. And we'll also keep an eye on how the tide changes in the Empire 8, as it were. Going to take a break. When we come back, we'll keep talking men's basketball. We'll head out to the Great Lakes region, talk Hanover men's basketball. Panthers head coach John Miller joins us. You've been listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. More Hoopsville after this.
This is our It's On Us pledge. It's on us to make a personal commitment to help keep all people safe from sexual assault, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or ability.
Not to be bystanders to the problem, but to be leaders of the solution. We invite you to join us in this campaign by informing your campuses about the It's On Us mission.
We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at D3Hoops.com at www.D3Hoops.com. We've got more schools than Division I, more fans than Division II, and more upsets than March Madness. There's 800 programs with over 11,000 games leading to 2 national championships. And we've been covering it all for over a decade. From Eastern to Occidental, from Puget Sound to Piedmont, from Southwestern to the University of New England, and from Hope to Calvin. Nobody covers Division III basketball like we do. We're at d3hoops.com at www.d3hoops.com.
For the love of the game. That's what it's all about, they say. But for those of us who are Division III student athletes, it's more than that.
It's more about team and the schools and communities we represent.
And for the many of us blessed with the strength to compete in sport at the college level, we understand that with what we were given comes a special obligation.
Our obligation to help those who have their own special needs and whose love for the game is no less intense.
That is why NCAA Division III teamed up with Special Olympics. Since August of 2011, we and others from Division III campus communities have volunteered more than 250,000 hours, time away from the classroom and practice field, reaching across the country to coach and mentor Special Olympics athletes.
And to learn that in giving, we receive so much more in return. Help us keep that dream alive.
Be part of it.
Get involved.
You can make a difference.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. Of course, if you've got questions for us, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. That's, of course, for the Hoopsville mailbag. We hope you have a mailbag question. We'll ask that question. It's for anybody to use, but obviously those who might be listening to the podcast or watching on demand who have a question but want to get it answered, and obviously we're not on the air, we'll do it on the following show. So email us, and if you're currently watching the show live, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. We'll put that up at the end of the show and answer your questions. They can be anything and everything. If you have questions for our guests, you can certainly try and do those as well, as long as they're not pre-taped. You can follow us on Twitter and ask questions there as well, at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. Of course, join us on Facebook, where we're Facebook live streaming the broadcast along with YouTube. You can do that at Hoopsville or at facebook.com/Hoopsville is what I'm trying to get at. And, of course, we're on Instagram. That's where we promote the show. Or when we're traveling, you can see our traveling exploits. You can follow us there at D3Hoopsville as well. Talking men's basketball now. We're sliding into the Great Lakes region as we do every Thursday. And if you haven't been paying attention to the HCAC race, the Heartland race, you might be missing out on some fun. 4 teams with double-digit victories and no more than 5 losses in Hanover, Anderson, Mount St. Joseph, and Transylvania. And all those teams are within 2 games of each other on top of the conference. Maybe not exactly how everyone thought it might shake out, though some of them are certainly in the conversation. But the one that jumps out to me is the one in the 2-way tie. Both teams are really kind of jumping out to me. Hanover and Anderson. Anderson's 8-1 and 11-5 overall. So is Hanover, 8-1 but 13-2 overall. Their season has been pretty good to start. With there's 2 losses, not too shabby. One to Washington U, and the other one to Mount St. Joseph in conference play. So it got us to thinking we ought to talk to Hanover. It's been a while. So joining us on the City of Salem Hoopsville hotline is John Miller, head coach of the Panthers men's program. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville.
Hey, Dave. It's good to be with you. Like you said, it has been a while. I was trying to put a time on the last time we'd gotten together. I know we were together in Vegas there a few years ago. But it's good to be with you.
Yeah, that might have been the last time I saw you, though I don't remember if we saw each other at the NCAA tournament later that year when you were at Transylvania. But certainly it's been a while, so it's great to chat. Glad you're still there, for that matter, because we're familiar with you.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, listen, 13-2 start. Not too bad. I think a lot of people took notice when you beat John Carroll in the 3rd game of the season, 90-89. Then you lost to WashU, and it wasn't close, lost by 20. But then I think that's where everybody oh, hey, look, it's Hanover, and then went, oh, never mind, and have ignored the fact that you've only lost 1 game since and have played pretty well. You've got to be thrilled with how this season has gone from your vantage point.
Yeah, I'm the same as a lot of coaches. All through the summer and into the preseason, you get a lot of questions about, hey, how are you going to be this year? How's your team going to be? And I'd say probably with this team as much as any, I really felt like there was a really wide range of where we could end up. I saw ways where we could be pretty good. I saw ways where I had concerns where we might struggle. And, as we've gotten going here, so much, I don't know if momentum's the right word, but, you have a win, like we had against John Carroll, and you mentioned we had a tough loss there to WashU, but you have a win against John Carroll. We'd won a couple other games close late, and that just has a way, I think, sometimes of kind of growing on your guys a little bit, and it's been a good start so far. Obviously, we have a long way to go, big one on Saturday, but it's been a good start for the Panthers so far.
Of course, John Carroll victory starting to look better after their 1-4 start on the season. They are 10-5 overall now. Of course, WashU is now nationally ranked or has been in and out of the rankings as well. So obviously those two games are a bit of a barometer. But you look the rest of the way and obviously got off to a really good start in conference play. And your only next loss was to Mount St. Joseph, which is the only loss in conference action. As we mentioned, you're 8-1 in a rather full HCAC scheduling. Got a couple non-Division threes, which are hard to gauge. You beat Boyce at the beginning of the year by 55, and you beat Ohio State Lima by a significant margin. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But outside of what we see on just paper, how has this team responded this year, and are they maybe playing above expectations even for yourself?
Well, I mean, I think you could look at that. It would be a possibility that maybe we've exceeded some of the expectations that people had, on the outside. I think probably within our team, like a lot of teams, your guys always, think you can have a really good year. And sometimes as a coach, you're trying to remind them of the things they're going to need to do to make that happen. I think that because of the consistency of success we've had here at Hanover for a long, long time, I think that, when preseason polls come out and when people think about the HCAC, there's always kind of an assumption on the outside that Hanover will be somewhere in the mix, But as it relates to, those thoughts that I had, like I said, going into the year, this team, like I said, as much as any I've had, I felt like it could be, I felt like we had, some of the things necessary to win a conference championship. But then, I also could see some areas where I knew we'd have to be better in order to make that happen. And so, you mentioned the four teams at the top of the Heartland right now. It's going to be a real battle here through the second half of the season.
Interestingly enough, that second half of the season, you've got a big one coming up on Saturday. It's at Anderson, who obviously you guys beat earlier in the year at home, 88-86. You guys are tied for first place in the conference, so this one has a lot riding on it, despite it being a mid-January game. Obviously, it can dictate a little bit of how the season progresses the rest of the way, puts you in the catbird seat should you come away with a victory. If it's a split, it at least lets everybody know where they stand. Is it hard to get the players to understand that significance, or is it almost an effort of trying to not let them know the significance of a game on January 21st versus February 21st?
Well, that's a great question, and I don't think that I don't think with our guys there'll be whether it was last Wednesday with Mount St. Joe, this coming Saturday with Anderson, as much as a coach as I like to tell them, hey, all 18 games count the same, which they do, do the math on it. You don't get any more credit for, a big win on the road as opposed to, a tough loss at home. The reality is I think our guys understand that, hey, it's a big game on Saturday, and it's the sort of game that I think when you play college basketball, right, no matter what level, no matter what league you're in, you want to get to have opportunities to play in those games that have that meaning. I think it's my job as a coach to, make sure they understand, hey, if we go and we were to find a way to win a game this coming Saturday, that would, while it might put us on the top of the standings when they looked on the website, right, we still got a long way to go. And the same thing could be said vice versa. If you came up a little short, that would put us into a split then with Anderson. We'd still have a win over them. They'd have a win over us. We try to, as much as possible, like a lot of teams and coaches, just keep trying to play them one at a time. But that's a challenge with your guys because they all know what some of these games mean for sure.
Obviously, this is a conference also that predicted Mount St. Joseph to win it. You guys have finished third, and we're far from having that ultimately decided. You guys are in the conversation now with Anderson, but and Transylvania has reemerged in the mix as well. Brian Lane's squad is back in the top half of the conference. Is this how this conference may finish, with you four kind of running and making the determination who's going to win it? Or is somebody from maybe the below that group going to surprise? Or can you guys maybe put your foot down further on this conference?
Well, if I was a gambling man, I don't know if I'm supposed to use that word on a NCAA podcast. So let's just say if I was a picking man, those four teams seem to be the strongest four as it would relate to the ability to stay at the top over the stretch of the conference season. With that being said, does that mean somebody not in those four can't knock one of those four off? That can definitely happen. You know how conference play is in every conference. Coaches know each other, teams know each other. You really have a good feel for people's strengths and weaknesses. Matchups become real important. So I think my breakdown of the Heartland halfway through is it'll be, I think, as the conference champion, one of those four teams. Anderson. I'm telling you, Dave, I don't know how much you've looked at their stats, but they are as good offensively as anybody. John Carroll can really score it. They got off to a slow start, but, they can really score it. Anderson can score it right up there with them. Brian's team at Trancey has really, I think, found themselves a little bit of a slow start, but they're probably one of the hottest teams around right now. Great win last night at Mount. And then Coach Kerrigan at Mount, he does a great job. Obviously, an NCAA tournament team last year. They just, pulled one out against us here. I noticed last night their starting five-man didn't play. I don't know if it's an injury or what, but that does change their team a little bit. And that's not to take anything away from Trancey in their win. But, I would anticipate that one of those four will probably be the team that's on the top at the end.
Talking to John Miller, head coach of Hanover Panthers, on top of the conference with Anderson in the HCAC. I got to go figure out if all the coaches paid you to say such kind things about them. Obviously, it's been an interesting conference over time. You guys, for example, already have pretty much met the win total from last year. You were 14-12 last year, 12-12 the year before that, and kind of in the middle of the pack of the conference. Coming off of years like 2014 and 2013 where you were on top of the conference along with Transylvania and others. But there's kind of been some tide shifting in the conference. Mount St. Joseph has now emerged in the last few years. We've seen Rose-Hulman be on top for a while. Is that just the nature of this conference that we tend to roll over the top a little bit versus some conferences where you always kind of know who's going to be on top?
Yeah, I think that's probably a fair assessment. With the type of programs and the type of schools in our league, I think there are some ebbs and flows to it. I don't know that we have anybody that has the Division III history that would be, say on par with a Worcester or a Illinois Wesleyan. I'm probably missing schools. I'm just, naming things off the top of my head. I'd like to think that within our league, over time, Hanover fits that bill as much as anybody in our league. But I don't know that I would put us at the level of those schools, competing. We've never made it to the Final Four or anything like that. And so, if you do the math, I think you add up win totals, we've won more league games over the last 7 or 8 years than anybody in our league. But when we finished at the top, the people that we finished at the top with has been a variety of people. It's Mount. It's been Rose with some of the great teams that Jim Shaw had there at Rose. One of the best coaches to ever coach the game, in my opinion, with Coach Shaw. Brian has had great teams at Trancey. Even, there was a year where we got beaten in the conference championship by Manchester, and that sort of thing. So I think that, you've got the Heartland pegged correctly, that there is some ebb and flow to, who has been at the top. Defiance, what was it, 2 years ago, they go to Whitewater and win, on the road in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So why that is exactly, I don't know. But I think that's kind of what the near history has shown us about our league.
Yeah, Manchester the other night, or a couple nights ago, lost to Transylvania by 7, then goes out and beat top 10 ranked North Park by 22, and then comes back and loses by 12 to Anderson. And talk about an ebb and flow. Let's talk a little bit about your team. This is a bit of a young team. I almost feel like you've arrived at this level maybe a little bit early. You have one senior on the team. They're third in this team in scoring, and Corey Munchmore, 13.5 points a game and 6 rebounds a game. You're led by a junior in Wes McKinney at 20.5 points a game and nearly 8 rebounds a game. Second on the team is a freshman, I think, Cam Fales, 15.5 points a game.
Cam's a sophomore, yeah.
Sophomore, I'm sorry. Yep, sophomore.
Yep.
Shoots 44% from beyond the arc and 52% from the field. And it's the fourth guy is the freshman, 8.9 points a game for Logan Ratz. And every one of those guys I've mentioned also hands out their fair share of an assist, more than an assist, almost 2 or 3 assists a game. So you've got one senior on this squad, obviously contributing. You've got a number of underclassmen who are also contributing. And you're getting a lot of scoring, a lot of distribution, and a lot of rebounding from a lot of different people.
Yeah, we are. I mean, we're the classic example, I think, of the sum of our parts added together is better than just our individual pieces, and that's not to undersell our players. I mean, Wes McKinney is having an outstanding year. I mean, he is really a guy that I think people need to take a look at. His numbers are off the charts. I mean, he's maybe the second leading scorer in our league. He's leading our league in rebounding. His percentages in terms of how he's shooting the basketball, have been outstanding. So that's not to take anything away from the job he's doing, or Corey Munchmore's doing, or Cam Fales is doing. But I do think we are a team that, if we get a good win, it's generally a really collective effort. We only have the one senior, but I tell you what, outside of Logan Ratz, who's a freshman, we're really relying on guys that do have some experience. I mean, the guys that are real important to us that don't show up on the stat sheet are Levi Buck and Colin Smith. And, you've seen a lot of Division III basketball, Dave, over the years. Yeah. I think there at times is something to be said to having some veteran players, to having some guys that have been through the battles. A guy like Levi Buck, a guy like Colin Smith are guys that didn't walk right in the door as freshmen and play, right? And in Division III, a lot of times guys now, if they don't play right away, they're not going to continue to play, right? And you see a lot of roster turnover and that sort of thing. And I think the hidden thing for us, and I've told a lot of people this, is those two guys are juniors. They've been through our practices for 2.5 years now. They know what we expect out of them. They know, what we expect them to do defensively. They're very comfortable in the roles that they have offensively. And so I think if you talk to a Cam, a Wes, a Corey Munchmore, they tell you, hey, a lot of their success is because they're out there with then a couple other guys that kind of know what they're doing. And so unlike some people, we're not real reliant on young guys outside of Cam, who's a sophomore, but basically started for us all last year. So he's a pretty experienced sophomore, So while we'll only graduate one, and on paper we may look kind of young based on that, I really feel like we've got some veteran guys that, like I said, have been in the weight room, are a little stronger, a little tougher, a little more able to handle adversity, and I think that's been real good for us.
The numbers jump out at me. I mean, I mentioned Cam Fales shooting 52% from the floor, 44% from beyond the arc. But you look at McKinney's numbers. He's shooting 53% from the floor. He's shooting 46% from beyond the arc, 47 of 102, 82% from the free throw line. For a good shooter, to lead the team in rebounding at nearly 8 a game is stellar. And then you look at your overall stats. You're outscoring your opponents by 15. You're out rebounding them by 5. You're committing 5 less fouls a game on average. And you're shooting 52% from the floor as a team. Those are a lot of big numbers that tell a lot when it comes to how dangerous is this team offensively.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of the non-Division III games that we've got. Hey, some of those stats are a little bit, a point differential. Like, let's be honest, right? I get it. It's a little bit off. But in terms of, we have tried to get better at not turning over the ball. Now, that's not something that you really want to talk about on the podcast a lot because it's kind of boring, right, to talk about like not turning it over. But, we've got some room to continue to improve there because, I tell our guys, if we don't turn it over and we can shoot it a little bit, it's a pretty good chance that those could turn into points, sort of thing. But, back to Wes, I'll tell you, Dave, Wes plays as hard and as consistently as any guy I've coached. His motor is very, very high. Has done a great job for us. I think he'd be the first to tell you that he's got some guys in Cam Fales and Levi Buck and Logan Ratz who do a great job. Colin Smith do a good job of getting him the ball when he's open, and that sort of thing. But the thing probably for us, honestly, Dave, to kind of flip the switch a little bit is, I'm always leery, with shooting the ball. Are we going to go up to Anderson on Saturday and shoot 52% from the field? I hope we do. I hope we don't turn it over and we get the good shots that we have a high percentage chance of making. But, we may have open shots we don't make. If we're going to stay in the game, it's more for us kind of where we rank out defensively. That's a really big deal for us. And that's probably the part of it that I pay most attention to, with our stats. What's our defensive field goal percentage? How many threes are we giving up? How much are we fouling? You brought that up. I think it's a big deal in college basketball. You got to be able to guard without fouling. You put people on the foul line a lot, you're in trouble. And so I hope we'll continue to improve in those areas as well.
Now, you take those 2 games out of the equation, you're outscoring your opponents 79.5 to 71.1. So still a significant number, almost double figures. Couple other questions. Obviously, the win over Ohio State Lima took place at Defiance, and was it your 200th career victory? I see a lot of things in this game that are kind of interesting, and we'll thank Tyler for pointing them out, your SID. First of all, 118 points, most programs scored under you, I believe, if not program history. Second of all, it's your 200th win, and it's at Defiance where you got your head coaching start, and, of course, you're coaching your alma mater. There's a lot of things that took place in that game that probably meant a lot to you.
Yeah, it was kind of funny, Dave, the way that worked out. I literally didn't know anything about it leading up to my 200th until about 30 minutes before the game. And I just happened to get an alert on Twitter that somehow somebody had mentioned it. And come to find out, a lot of other people knew about it. My whole team knew about it. Of course, Tyler knew about it. The people at Defiance knew about it. And it was kind of a neat deal because old Dick Kaiser, the old former athletic director there at Defiance, gave me my first chance to be a head coach up there at Defiance, and had our first win in the Purple and Gold tournament, which that year, my first year, was a tip-off tournament against Grace College, NAIA school in Indiana. And then, ended up for the 200th being back at Defiance in the Purple and Gold Classic. So that was kind of a neat deal. Of course, my former assistant is now the head coach there at Defiance. So it worked out well. It worked out well, and it was a neat day.
What's the message to the team the rest of the way? Yeah, you're off to obviously this great start. You obviously have a lot of important games ahead of you, including Anderson, as we mentioned, coming up on Saturday. You'll be at Transylvania to start the month of February, and you got to go to Mount St. Joseph. So interestingly enough, the 3 you're battling with, you're going to have to play on the road the rest of the way. So what's the message to the team here? And I can predict it's focus on each game, but I mean in the grand scheme of things, what is it?
Right. Well, I'll tell you today we're going to come in and we're going to look at a little bit at what went on last night. And again, this is coach speak, but it is truth. We got to just continue to see if we can find ways to get better. Going through the second time of conference play now, part of your scattering report, is watching that first game, as well. So, hey, what did we do well? What did we not do well in that game? What do we have to do better? You're right. Certainly, hey, let's have all of our attention be on Anderson, and then we'll figure out who we play next after that. Now, I can say that to these guys. Will they necessarily listen to all of it and not block everything else out? Probably not, right? They're on their phones all the time. They know all this stuff. Some of them will probably even listen to me tonight and see if I say anything good or bad about them. But actually, so like you said, we've got to go on the road to those three places. We'll probably really kind of stay away from talking a lot about that. But it really is just, let's figure out what we need to do in this next one to give ourselves the best chance to win. And if we win, we'll move on to the next one. If we lose, we'll move on to the next one as well.
Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk about your team and the conference. Obviously, big game coming up on Saturday against Anderson, but obviously a lot of big games coming up the rest of the conference way. I appreciate you taking the time. As always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
No, I thank you for the opportunity to be on with you here tonight, and appreciate all you do. I know it takes a lot of time for you to put all these things together, and it really is a neat deal and gives a great bit of publicity to a lot of these hardworking ball players in Division III.
Well, thank you for the kind words. We certainly enjoy doing it, and having you come on the show makes it a lot easier. Good luck the rest of the season. I'll look forward to chatting to you down the road.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
John Miller joining us from Hanover. Again, the Panthers 13-2 overall, 8-1 in conference play. Big game against 11-5, 8-1 Anderson coming up on Saturday. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll head up into Minnesota. We'll talk Bethel men's basketball. You listen to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. More Hoopsville after this.
Division III allows you to give yourself to other things.
Having that free time allows me to pursue the things that I want to pursue.
Division III athletics affords students the opportunity to, engage in the other interests in their campus and in their lives outside of that sport.
It allows you to just be able to do everything you want to do. I wouldn't change it for the world.
I'm a Division III student athlete, and I know how powerful words can be. The term gay doesn't mean stupid, lame, or less than.
So I pledge to speak up if I hear the term gay used in a derogatory way or any other homophobic terms.
If you can play in Division III.
I'm a Division III student athlete, and my teammates unconditionally accepted me as part of their family. So now I pledge to do the same for others. If you can play in Division III.
Educate your student body, faculty, staff, and local community on how to prevent sexual assault and how to support survivors.
To recognize that non-consensual sex is sexual assault. To identify situations in which sexual assault may occur.
To intervene in situations where consent has not or cannot be given.
To create an environment in which sexual assault is unacceptable and survivors are supported.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the show. Don't forget, time is running out to get an email in for this show for the Hoopsville mailbag segment. Email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. We will answer any mailbag questions that we have gotten coming up in the next segment as we wrap up Hoopsville for this evening. Don't forget to follow us or ask us questions also on Twitter @D3Hoopsville or use the hashtag Hoopsville. Follow us on Facebook where we're streaming the show live. You can watch us there as well, facebook.com/Hoopsville. And, of course, you can also follow us on Instagram at D3Hoopsville using the hashtag Hoopsville as well. Instagram and Twitter, the same accounts essentially as well. Been talking a lot of good basketball here. Now we're heading out to Minnesota and talking about the men's program there at Bethel. The team is 11-4 despite, unfortunately, losing 3 of their last 5 games. But there's probably more to it than just saying they've lost 3 of their last 5. There's a lot going on at Bethel, and the team was certainly playing good basketball in a conference that's a little bit in flux. We're used to the Tommies of St. Thomas dominating this conference for the most part. That is not the case this season, so it adds in a little bit more interest. So joining us on the City of Salem Hoopsville hotline is the head coach for Bethel, Doug Novak. Coach, welcome to Hoopsville.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I appreciate you taking the time. First and foremost, before the recent struggles, obviously this team was off to a tremendous start. You have to be thrilled with not only what was an 11-2 start, but also just the way you played against some of your conference opponents to start the season.
Yeah, we were off to a really good start, and in fact, we've actually played some pretty good basketball. We just haven't come out on the winning side. These teams in our league are really well balanced. They're good, and we're a small team that has to fight and claw for every inch that we've got. And sometimes you don't make plays down the stretch to win the games, but there's no real problems here or issues. It's just that it's a very talented league and well balanced.
Obviously lost the 2 games most recently against St. John's on the road and at Concordia Moorhead. It was part of a 3-game road stretch that dated back to the win over Gustavus Adolphus on January 11th. Prior to that, you lost to St. Thomas on January 4th at home, 83-74. Kind of helped right St. Thomas's ship a little bit. But, this 5-game stretch has been a little bit tough again. 2 on home and then 3 on the road. You'll at least get back at home coming up this weekend against Hamlin. But, you say you're playing good basketball, and certainly the numbers say that. But what has been the biggest challenge? Is it more than just a size differential?
Well, no, the biggest challenge has been the other teams. I mean, I'm serious when I say this. They're really good teams, and when you go on the road, anything can happen. And you might get in a little bit of foul trouble here. You might have a little bit. Guy might be nicked up, and you're playing those games back to back. It feels like, and you're on the road, like anything can happen. I just have so much respect for what our league does, and sometimes we just beat up on ourselves. But no, I'm extremely happy when we win, and I'm extremely disappointed when we lose. And it was a heartbreaker last night on a last-second shot. But that's the game. That's the game of basketball. And if we have these extreme highs and extreme lows, we're probably not going to go anywhere. But, if we can see, we did a lot of good things, and sometimes we do more good things in a loss than we do when we win. Now, I'd take the win any day, over the coach talk I just gave you. But I sure don't want to hide the good things that we've accomplished just because we didn't execute a couple plays down the stretch.
Well, I said in the intro that this is a conference that St. Thomas has dominated for the most part for 11 years now. And obviously in the last couple of years it hasn't been as easy for St. Thomas, but they've still come out on top with maybe one blemish. And the rest of you kind of fighting for the scraps, as it were. This year it does look different because St. Thomas has kind of come back to the fold, but maybe in reality it's also revealed a little bit more of how difficult this conference has become, because we've even admitted over the last couple of years it used to be just talking about St. Thomas, and now we're talking about Bethel and Hamlin and St. Olaf and St. John's and others. The depth has really started to shine here.
Yeah, and I've always said this. There's always talk around town is that St. Thomas doesn't belong in this league because, whether it's facilities or some financial things that they have that may be above the rest of us. And I always say absolutely not. We want St. Thomas in this league. They are first class. They do things the right way. They play an elite style of basketball and for that matter, football and the rest of their sports. And what it does is that it forces the rest of the league to get better. Mm-hmm. We can whine about them, or we can just watch and say we got to get better, and to be able to compete with the top of the league. And obviously, they were dominant before I got here, and they've been dominant since I've been here, and they're really good, classy organization. But I do think when you have a team like St. Thomas in your conference, it elevates the rest of the teams.
And that's certainly what it seems like this conference has experienced in the last few years as more teams have gotten into the conversation. And obviously a second team made the NCAA tournament recently in St. Olaf. And obviously that's what everybody's fighting for, is that opportunity. What else has changed, though? Obviously, St. Thomas has come down a little bit. Has it been that the apple of St. Thomas ahead of you, or the carrot, I should say, has spurred everybody on, or has almost the parity of Division III allowed all of you to start getting your own bits of talent to now compete?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know if I have the answer. I'm sure it's a combination of both. St. Thomas is really good still. I mean, they just had some younger, and I don't even know if they're younger players. They've been on that roster for a while. They're probably playing JV or backup roles, but they were really good players. So I mean, I don't know if I have a full explanation for what the balance is. I just know it's a well coached and balanced league.
What's the difference for you guys? I mean, we go back to 2014. You were 14-13. The year before that, 15-11. But the 2 seasons since, 19-9, 18-9, now 11-4. What's been the change for Bethel men's basketball that has allowed you to kind of rise to the top of this conference and, before the 2-game loss, at least be leading the conference?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's we've been pretty consistent with what we do, for the last 4 years, and there have been some guys that have been able to grow in the program and develop a little bit of an overused word, but culture of how we want to play, of how we want to practice, how we want to conduct ourselves. And so when a new guy comes into the program, it's much easier than our first year when everybody was new, including myself. So we're just establishing kind of a way of life of how we want to do things around here that I think has made a big difference.
You look at your roster, you have a large roster, quite a few numbers in the sense, but you've only got 2 seniors, and they're both guards. 2 of the 3 are obviously part of the 2 of them, I should say, are part of the 5 leading scorers. You're led by Bridgeport Tussler at 16 points a game, but it's Bryson Wojtka and Trevor Hall who are your 2 seniors at 13 points each. Is this a sign that this program's just continuing to evolve, that obviously next year should continue what we've seen the last few years?
Well, that would be the goal, is that you just keep on building off of each year. And I think that first year that I was here, and we probably had 5 or 6 seniors on that team, and maybe one of them played, but they just jumped right into the program and laid such a foundation, and they wanted to leave their mark on the program in a positive way. And I still think, because they're around, they're coaching our JV team, they're in the stands, and they're still around our program. They just don't go away. And the mark that they made 4 years ago is paying off, for these last couple of years, in terms of the kind of men that we want to be in this program.
4 of your starters are in double figures. Your 5th starter may not be in double figures, but he's certainly got contributions elsewhere. You've got a player off the bench in double figures in scoring. You've got a 4th player nearly in double figures in Jack Jensen at 8 points a game, also coming off the bench. That core of 7 is obviously the biggest part of your offense, but it's also interesting that you've got 5 players in double figures, and that so many can find ways to contribute.
Yeah, we try to share the ball and space the floor as much as we can, and we have a lot of versatile players. We like to say we like to have a style that lets players grow. And so Trevor Hall at 5'11" might be one of the better posters in our league, and he came in at 140 pounds, and he's developed. And I didn't know he was going to grow that way. He was going to grow into that game, but it was nice that we were flexible enough to let their games teach us. And so it's always a little bit of a battle or challenge. New players getting to know a coach, but it's also coaches getting to know players, getting to know how they're developing, what side of the floor they like, and try to put them in as good of positions as possible to make each other better.
Again, you have a whole mess of juniors and youth on this team, and obviously they're the ones who are contributing the most. Does that almost maybe take the pressure off in some senses that, you still do have another year? I know for 2 seniors, technically you don't, but there's no pressure to get it done this year or to make a significant step forward this year. Is that pressure removed when you have so many underclassmen?
No. I don't really think about it that way because I'm just enjoying the time I have with this particular team, and I really don't get too far out from today. It's a strength of mine. It's not something I work on, but it also can be a weakness too because when I say that I'm only thinking about today, I am only thinking about today.
I can understand that. A lot of coaches do that.
Yeah. So, and I might be a little bit on the obsessed side with that. So, no, I mean it's just fun knowing that the program and the roster is balanced to keep on growing, so you don't have to scrap something and start all over. And again, we want this thing to continue, and we want to be able to grow in the right direction. So it's been a lot of fun.
So what's the message to the team? Obviously, the next 3 games are at home. You got Hamlin, St. Olaf, and I can't speak.
McAllister.
Thank you. It's a simple word. I just apparently can't say it. At home. Then you're at St. Thomas. Then you're back at home for 2 more against Carleton and St. John. So obviously a really important stretch coming up to try and take advantage of the home court. So what do you tell your team? What's the message in practice or in pregame?
Yeah, it'll be fun being at home. It feels like we've played a lot of these games in the first semester on the road.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun, but really, it's because we are versatile, because we have a lot of flexibility in how we play. I mean, sometimes you can be too flexible and too versatile, and you can forget about some of your strengths. And so we are scoring quite a few points. We get it out, we run in transition, share the ball. But at the same time, there are times in the game where you really got to work a possession. So at this time of year, defenses are getting better. Conversion defense, they're getting set. So maybe they're taking a couple transition points away. And so we've got to be able to adjust and be willing to grind out some possessions with our half-court offense, which has been pretty good over the last couple of years.
Interesting side notes on this program I want to kind of touch on. First and foremost, you most of your roster comes obviously from Minnesota or Iowa. You have one from Colorado, but the one that jumps out at me is a freshman, Mo Bullock from Ketchikan, Alaska, very southern tip of Alaska, not exactly easy to get in and out of. How in the world do you get a player from Ketchikan, Alaska to Minnesota to play basketball at Bethel?
I think the MIAC in general and Bethel in general the core will always be Minnesota kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that's who we are. But I do like some diversity. I think it's healthy for any team. I got it. I played at the University of Tennessee, and so I had a couple foreign guys on our team, and I really enjoyed that experience. And this one he happened to have a relative in Minnesota and reached out to us, and we watched the film, talked to him a little bit. And, it's turned out to be a pretty good fit, and he seems to be growing, every day.
Obviously a freshman, but that's a pretty cool story. The other one you kind of touched on there, you're a University of Tennessee grad, which doesn't mean much until you look at your bio and notice that you played tennis at Tennessee, not necessarily a basketball background. So how did you make the shift from playing on a number 1 tennis program to coaching in basketball?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a weird background. It's not normal in terms of most basketball coaches. But I was a basketball guy all the way through high school, and I'd planned on going to play basketball in college, and I picked up tennis late, and then I had this opportunity. I visited Ole Miss in the University of Tennessee, and I chose Tennessee, and I had that opportunity. I'm a 5'10" guy that wanted to be a pro at something, and I was getting so good so fast at tennis, even though that my love was basketball. I mean, it never wavered, and I just said, you know what, my best chance is playing tennis. And I got to play with some great players, guys that had Wimbledon and U.S. Open championships, and it was so much fun being around pros and seeing how they work. And my former coach at the University of Tennessee was Mike DePalmer, and he was actually an assistant basketball coach at Florida State with Hugh Durham.
Okay.
Before Hugh Durham went to Georgia. So he had a basketball background, and I just loved playing for him. and learning from him and on all the camp work we did over the summer. And then during the summers, I worked all basketball camps because I knew I wanted to be a basketball coach. And then right when I finished, I thought, well, this is the dumbest thing I did is play tennis. I've got no contact with basketball. And so I took a tennis job at Clemson University. So my tennis coaching background was all set. And I was coming from a pretty high-level program and then moved into Clemson and coached there. And then a guy named Cliff Ellis was the basketball coach, and he helped me get into a junior college assistant basketball coaching job. And then from there, I was just straight basketball.
Interesting. You won the U.S. Open, though, so no, that's Novak Djokovic. Never mind.
Yeah, wrong one.
Yeah, different Novak. Completely. Well, it's certainly fascinating. But then the other thing is you come to Bethel back in 2013 via Tulane as an assistant coach at Tulane. I mean, there isn't necessarily any straight line I can find that gets you into Bethel. How did you decide that Bethel was the right choice, especially at Division III, where obviously, I mean, you may have had some experience, but my point being, you're at Tulane, you're still in that D1 world.
Yeah, well, I thought the city of New Orleans and Bourbon Street was very similar to what Bethel and their faith-based campus.
Yeah.
What their faith-based campus had to offer.
Yeah, totally the same parallel.
Yeah. It was an absolute lunatic move. And trust me, it was not on my day planner. It was not something that I was thinking about. Is a friend of mine who's the baseball coach here. He played for the Twins. And then he played with my brother-in-law. I talked with him, and he said, the job's open. Would you be interested? And I said, no, why would I be? And then we talked some more, and I realized that I hadn't been home. I grew up in South Dakota, and I hadn't been home in about 4 years. And I thought, you know what, this would be a good chance, and this will sound terrible, but this will be a good chance for me to come home and see my mom and then get back to work at Tulane. And so I'll go talk with Bethel and get out of there and move on. And when I came here, I was just blown away. I mean, it wasn't the coaching level here, the football coach, amazing. Baseball, track, you name it. I sat for 3 hours with about 15 coaches around a table, and we started to talk. My mom and dad owned a bar in South Dakota, and it felt like I was at the bar with men talking about sports. And then after about 10, 15 minutes, it went to a level where pretty deep with some faith topics, and it wasn't uncomfortable. And when I left there, it was actually in May, and it was snowing. I was like, this is really insane. And I said, I think I have to take this job. And I didn't want to. And I just said a little prayer in my car, and I said, I'm going to shut up. If there's any signs, I'll listen to them. And sure enough, every step I took, every turn I looked, there was some sort of sign that was leading me to Bethel. And so if you want to say that's the Holy Spirit or coincidence, I don't know which one it was, but I know this, that it was such a pull to come here. And I talked it over with my wife and family a little bit. I have 3 daughters, and we made the move. I mean, it's not a normal path, because I was thinking my next job might be just another Division I job or maybe along there. But I was enjoying what I was doing. I was working with some great people with Ed Conroy. But this was just too much of a pull, and it's been a perfect fit for me. Like whatever I thought it was going to be, it's 100 times better.
Well, that's cool. And obviously the highest winning percentage of any Bethel men's coach, at least to this point. So it's worked out for the program as well. And to continue on kind of the interesting facets of you and the coaching and whatnot, you've also made the decision. And honestly, I said to you before we went on air, I don't think it's that big a deal in the grand scheme of things, but it is a big deal to many. You having a female assistant on your program, Alicia Vestendahl. I made a comment to you before air. I mean, we've had male assistant coaches and head coaches on the women's side. I've had female athletic trainers as part of my athletic life. I don't think it's that uncommon to have them around, but it's new. It's not something that's really done on the men's side. What drove you to that decision?
Well, when I first took this job, I mean, I guess the one thing that I was not expecting was to have much help on the support side. So if an athletic trainer, great. If we didn't, that's fine. I kind of thought it'd be me, and then maybe an assistant if I could afford one. So I wasn't expecting much there. Coming from Division I, we had everything. We had assistants for the assistants, and we had multiple athletic trainers. And then when I got here, I was shocked at the talent level that was around here. And Alicia Vistendahl was our athletic trainer. So she was a female athletic trainer for our men's basketball team. And again, I didn't have very many expectations for her in her role. In fact, I think it's 2 days after practice, she asked me, how are we doing? Do we need to do anything else? And I said, to be honest with you, I don't even notice you here. And it sounds rude, but she took it as a compliment because she said, well, that means I'm doing my job then. I don't want to be a distraction. And that's really all I wanted out of her. Don't be a distraction. And then one night I'm at home and I'm watching film of practice, and I see her on the sideline with one of our injured players, and she's doing some rebounding type drills and functional movement, things that we think are important on how to move. And I was like, well, she kind of knows what she's doing. And then she's the first one to like pick up balls after practice, and she started to make our lives, the coaching staff, a lot easier without asking for anything. And sometimes your first year is such a whirlwind. You're trying to figure things out, get things organized. And then we'd go on a road trip, and she'd say, I can plan the meals for you guys. I'll call them in and make it easier. And I've even got some coupons for a couple pizza places. And I said, well, that's outstanding. So it just started that way. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to start paying you to be director of basketball operations, so you can start taking care of calendars. You can start, so we can be a little bit more professional in how we do everything, and even our recruiting documents and developing some website ideas. And then before you know it, before she had the title of assistant basketball coach, every kid in our program thought she was an assistant basketball coach. The title did not make her the assistant. I said her presence and knowledge. And as I find out, I got to know her a little bit better. She was with the Minnesota Lynx and the Timberwolves, and she's around some high-level basketball. She's been she knows her stuff. And then she started working camps and doing all kinds of things for us. And she's a great coach. I would not hire a female just to hire a female. I hired her for quality.
The article online on your website is tremendous about her. It makes you really appreciate more of what you talk about, kind of doing the little things without being noticed, and all of a sudden it's making a big difference. And it's wonderful. I love it. I'm more intrigued than anything because it clearly is a basketball mind in a different form as an athletic trainer who happens to end up stepping up back into a role of coaching, and it's clearly made a difference. And found it fascinating. So I appreciate you sharing that story with us here.
We actually get a double bonus out of that because, again, if you look at our schedule and the MIAC schedule, we're playing 3 games a week, and the toll it takes on bodies, and to have a professional right next to you that not only working them out in our practices and drills, but knows their bodies, knows how they move, and can treat them or do the prehab necessary to keep them healthy. It's invaluable.
Yeah, you're definitely getting a double down there, and of course she's a Bethel grad too, so it adds to the story. It's a wonderful story, and I love it. I hope we see more of it. Coach, I took a lot of your time. I really appreciate it. Really fascinating to see how the Royals are doing this season, and obviously what is a fascinating MIAC race. There's one on the women's side too, but the men's side is certainly worth taking notice of, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us. As always, we give the coach the final word. Any final thoughts you want to share with those who may be tuning in?
Oh, great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Well, thank you, Coach. Good luck the rest of the season. We'll look forward to keeping an eye on Bethel.
Thanks.
Doug Novak joining us here on Hoopsville, on the City of Salem Hoopsville's hotline. We appreciate him taking the time. If you want to get an idea of Coach Vestendahl's road to the assistant coach job under Coach Novak, it's on Bethel's site. We'll try and get a link out for you. It's a great story. In the meantime, keep an eye on Bethel as well. As we mentioned, they are 11-4 overall. Unfortunately, lost 3 of their last 5, but I have a feeling that tide will change as they play 5 of their next 6 at home. We'll keep an eye on them. Obviously, Hamlin and St. Olaf coming up immediately, with Manchester St. Thomas following suit after that. Going to take another break. When we come back, the Hoopsville mailbag, if there are any questions, and we'll wrap up the show with anything else we find pertinent. You're listening to Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com from the WBCA and ABC studios. More Hoopsville after this.
College basketball lives in Kansas City at the College Basketball Experience at Sprint Center. The College Basketball Experience is the place to get your game on. It's not a museum, it's an experience you won't forget. Discover the history of the game in the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame, featuring the Gallery of Honor, Mentor Circle, and Honor Theater. Suit up in the latest CBE logoed Nike gear at the CBE Hoop Shop. Elevate your game today and visit the house that college basketball built.
It starts right when you hit the court. You imagine your finest moment. The game-winning shot that gets you to the dance, a monster dunk or no-look pass, and cutting down the net. Sports lets us dream of our own success and prepare us for our finest moments on and off the court.
I'm a current Division III student athlete, and I remember how intimidating the first year of college can be.
So if you're a first-year student athlete and nervous about coming out as LGBTQ, I pledge to stand by your side as your ally.
If you can play Division III.
We are Division III student athletes, and you can be too. If you can play in Division III.
I did receive a non-athletic scholarship upon entering school.
I got the presidential scholarship, which was huge for me.
I think there's more opportunities for academic scholarships in Division III.
I did receive academic scholarships. Just being involved on campus, being a leader, all those things combined kind of get me recognized. It's a great experience for me.
And welcome back to Hoopsville, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed the show. It's been a full one. If you've got any questions for us now or for future shows, email us hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Join us on Instagram. Ask questions there at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville. You can also do it on Facebook, facebook.com/Hoopsville, where we are streaming live. And we hope you can take advantage of that opportunity as well. So far, great segments. Appreciate it. We do have a mailbag segment. We'll get to that in just a moment, but I want to just thank our guests who appeared on the show. I'm just going to double check scores. Really nothing major happening tonight. Only one top 25 team in men's or women's basketball action. And that game hasn't even started yet. It's number 21 Claremont Munscripts are taking on Chapman. But that doesn't start for another hour on the West Coast. Otherwise, nothing jumping out at me. Southern Vermont, 86-69. Obviously, we talked a lot about Southern Vermont last year. They're 6-9 this season in a NECC. NECC being led by Becker right now, but it's a little off center. Becker's like 5-0, and in second place is Leslie at 5-2. So Southern Vermont is 4-2. So they're in the conference race. Just nothing much to talk about. Other games, really nothing jumping out at me as like, oh, wow. We do have a game, looks like in overtime. I swear that says overtime 15. That's not possible. But Emmanuel and Johnson and Wales are calling up the live stats. It says 15th overtime. I kid you not. I'm quite sure by looking at the score, it is not the 15th overtime. 55-50. It just isn't. Don't know. It literally says 15th overtime. I'm going to go out on a limb and say first overtime. But that is one of the crazier things I have seen. Emmanuel at Johnson and Wales. It appears they're in overtime. Not the 15th, because otherwise they didn't score anything for 14 overtimes. I've seen some crazy things, but that one takes the cake. Nonetheless, otherwise, nothing really score-wise really jumping out at me. It's a quiet Thursday night here in Division III. So let's take a look at the mailbag, shall we? got questions in. We appreciate those who sent those questions in to us. Let's see here. Let's call them up. And we've got a few, so here we go. Remember to email us, hoopsville at d3hoops.com. That's hoopsville at d3hoops.com to be part of the segment. First question is from Dr. Stevens in Iowa. Says, I'm curious how winter illnesses, cold, flu, viruses, impact basketball teams during the season, especially when they travel. Well, as many of us know, it impacts them greatly. Heck, it's impacting me as I've been suffering from a cold and I'm not even out there playing. But certainly illnesses in for basketball teams, especially on the Division III level, are very prevalent. I'm trying to remember if it was last year or the year before. We had I want to say it was New Paltz or somebody up in the New York State got a serious illness that went through the team, and had to postpone some games. That's more on the rare side. It certainly happens, but just not all that often. And you've also had illnesses on campuses like that have shut down campuses. Ursinus went through something recently in that case. But travel, I mean, first off, you deal with those schools where maybe you have to travel. I think Ursinus' case was last year. Traveling to Ursinus, campus was shut down, so games were postponed. Teams couldn't leave, teams couldn't arrive. You have teams that certainly, what was it? New Jersey City in the last couple of weeks has had not only injuries, but illnesses going through them, and I know it affected them. I would argue at least one of their losses was affected by illness. It's not that uncommon, and travel is certainly part of it. I know when we go out to Vegas, I always risk being in the dry air, especially in the hotel room, of starting a sinus cold myself. I'm not even an athlete, obviously, at least not anymore. So you wonder if the players heading out there also have to deal with that dry air and such. So it's a big impact and can affect games dramatically with wins and losses and the like. Not that uncommon. I think sometimes the flu makes a strong difference in the division and with teams, and sometimes it's not much of a point. I think this year is one of those average years. You hear about it. Coaches don't like to use it as an excuse, but you certainly notice it. Another question. This one's actually a two-parter from Eric in Minneapolis. First part, he says, as teams enter the midway mark of their conference schedule and they begin to face the same team a second time around, how do teams adjust, and do you put more weight in whoever wins the first wins the final of the two meetings? Team A loses the first matchup to Team B, and then Team A defeats Team B. The second part of the question is, there seems like, depending on the teams, more weight with a big conference win the second time around could help them heading into the end of February conference tournament time. You know, I don't have an opinion on it. As a top 25 voter, certainly the second win takes more prevalence, or the second game takes more prevalence than the first one, especially if the first one was a November, December type of scenario. I will take more stock in those games when they're later in January and when those rematches are closer together. For example, in the UAA, they play that, or at least one of them does. I think everybody has that back-to-back weekend where, excuse me, my cold's acting up, where they'll play Team X and Y, let's say at home on a particular weekend, and then the following weekend we'll play X and Y on the road. Same two teams. I believe that is coming up, not this weekend, but the following 2 weekends is when the UAA swaps like that. And in those cases, I tend to discount a little bit. I almost look at the whole picture of those games instead of one game versus another, because they're literally playing back to back. And I've seen splits as much as I've seen sweeps be pretty prevalent there. Sure, a game on February 10th or 15th compared to a game on January 2nd or December 10th, I'm going to put more stock in that second game, because the other difference too is teams have been playing longer. They've gotten used to each other. Maybe injuries are affecting things or aren't affecting things now. You literally could have 2 different games, especially in conferences like the NJAC, where transfers at midseason are pretty prevalent. You could literally have 2 different teams. So yeah, the second game certainly takes a little bit more stock. And as a top 25 voter, I think it takes more stock. But sometimes flukes happen too. I don't know how much they impact the conference tournament. I would definitely agree that if you play late, your second game late in the season, then go in the conference tournament and face that team again, the winning team the second time around is going to have a lot more confidence, most likely. But if that game is in late January and the conference tournament's not till late February, I don't think it has a hill of beans of difference. I put a little bit more stock in the more recent results of the two, but I'll look at both and understand the dynamics going on. But yeah, I could see how it has more of a kind of an impact but it depends on when that game's played. Again, a January 2nd time around, late January, I don't care about. I don't think it has much effect in February, but that game being in late February going into the conference tournament, I think has a much bigger effect. We talked to St. Lawrence tonight. Remember, they lost 5 of their last 8 games last season after having kind of a nice middle of the season run. They played Skidmore, as they will this year, to finish the season, and they will always do that. It's just the way the conference schedule works. So their one game, basically their travel partner is Skidmore. Their one game is that final weekend. They then played them less than a week later in the conference championship. I think that's where that impact absolutely has a factor. Absolutely, it could be the opposite too. If you beat a team rather easily, you might coast into a championship game, and the other team might nip you. But for the most part, I think that's where that impact is. Final question, got this from Sheila in Boston. Was just catching up on the podcast and on the last show and appreciated the interview with Coach G.P. Gromacki. Thanks. Do you think Amherst can finish the season undefeated? I don't see them getting tested the rest of the way. Well, they will get tested at least once, as they've got the Tufts game coming up. Remember the NESCAC, they only play one round of games. Excuse me. So, yes, Wesleyan, Williams, and Amherst will play a second round of games that don't count, like Williams and Amherst, that second round is coming up. And then the 3 teams in Maine, I believe it's Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby, will play their second round of games, but that's just amongst themselves. The conference does not play a second round robin. So thus, Tufts and Amherst will not play each other more than once. And their first meeting and only meeting is February 4th. It is at Tufts. That is, I think, their biggest challenge. That being said, I think Bowdoin this weekend for Amherst women is going to be a tough game. Bowdoin is coming in at 12-2. They are 2-1 in the conference, half game back of Amherst. Tufts is a half game up on Amherst at 4-0. Amherst is 3-0. Then it's Middlebury at 3-1. Bowdoin and Trinity at 2-1, and then Bates at 2-2. And Williams is 11-5, but 1-3 in the conference. And by the way, Connecticut College is 10-5, 1-3 in the conference. The way Amherst is playing, I agree. It doesn't look like they got a lot of tests, but I think Bowdoin will be a little bit of a challenge. They have to be careful against Lehman. Not because Lehman's a tough team, but it's a non-conference game. You never know if they may just take a different approach, though, according to Coach Gromacki, they weren't. But Williams is after that Lehman game, 2 days later. I hate the trap game comparison, but if there is one, that's the definition. Lehman's ahead of the rival game. Are they looking ahead to Williams and Lehman surprises them? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but those are the games that I myself will look at. Lehman's 9-7, by the way. After Williams, then it's 3 games later is Tufts and then Middlebury, Hamilton, and they finish it out. So, sure, I can see why people may think Amherst doesn't have a lot of Tufts tests left. But I think Bowdoin's going to be a test. I think Williams will be a test on January 25th. And Tufts, obviously the number 1 team, coming up on February 4th is going to be a test. No, I would not be surprised if they come out of this undefeated at all. It's either them or Tufts coming out of this undefeated. I would not be surprised if either one of them makes the NCAA tournament undefeated. It's impossible for both of them to make the NCAA tournament undefeated since they play each other, and they're going to have to probably play each other in the conference championship, or one of them will have lost to keep that from happening. So neither of them is going to go undefeated into the NCAA tournament. But I suspect there's a good chance one of them does. And listen, I had a little birdie in my ear who said at the beginning of the season, watch for G.P. Gromacki's team. They're going to dominate. They're going to go undefeated, and they're going to march right towards a national championship. I don't doubt it. Gromacki's lost, 20 games in his entire tenure at 24 games in his entire tenure at Amherst. They haven't lost more than 4 games a season. I don't doubt it. I don't see them with more than a loss going into the NCAA tournament. If it is 2 losses, it's both the Tufts, one in the regular season and one in the conference championship. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think they split with Tufts at worst for Amherst. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's as easy as you think it is there, Sheila. But I do think it's going to be an interesting finish to the season for Amherst. Again, I think they got 3. I think Bowdoin this weekend is a good barometer for many people to grasp how Amherst is. If they blow Bowdoin out, Amherst is much more for real than people realize. Then they've got that Williams game on the 25th, and then they've got that game on the 4th of February against Tufts. Those are the 3 games I'm looking at as an Amherst fan. I think that's going to do it, unless you got other questions. Again, the NCAA Convention is taking place this weekend. We will watch the votes on Saturday morning. Nothing major that affects basketball, nothing major that really affects schedules. We do have that. Really one of the reasons I enjoy going to the convention is Friday in the business meetings kind of gives you a barometer of what may be coming down the pike. And I'm curious as to how that plays out, but unfortunately not being there, we're either going to have to follow this on Twitter or follow some other things or talk with some people about what comes out of the business meeting on Friday morning, tomorrow morning, to truly understand if anything's going to be impacted in basketball. I do know a couple things. For example, there has been talk about limiting the number of exhibition, essentially, or exemption games in Division III basketball. They have a lot if you really add them up. I know there's talk about maybe cutting that back. I'd be curious in the next year if that's where that heads. There is a recruiting thing on the ballot, and there was another one on the ballot, though it's nothing major, but we'll keep an eye on it. But again, the convention taking place, and we'll certainly keep an eye on how that all plays out. We're going to take go off the air. We're going to come back on Sunday. A reminder again, our fundraising efforts will start hopefully on Sunday with the official kickoff. We'll get hopefully our ducks in a row by then to do that. And then the marathon is in 2 weeks from now. We will go on the air at 10 a.m. that morning and stay on the air until at least 10 p.m. with plenty of guests. We are already working on that guest list, and we will make a full-throated effort on it in the next week to get that settled. We will get that show link up on the site as well so you can keep track of some of the guests that we're getting. If you got guest ideas or you want to hear from somebody, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com, and we will certainly look into those guest ideas. And the fundraising efforts help us basically maintain this show, for the lack of a better description. We'll talk plenty more about that down the road. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank our guests, of course, from Messiah, Mike Miller, women's basketball coach, and thank his SID, Steve King, for the help. From St. Lawrence, I want to thank Chris Downs for coming on the show. I want to thank the entire SID staff, who is shorthanded up there, for helping us as well. Hanover's men's basketball coach, John Miller, for coming on the show. Thank you very much. And his SID, Tyler. And then Bethel's men's basketball coach for coming on the show. Great talking to Doug Novak. Fascinating story on his end, not only about how he came to Division III and Bethel in particular, but why he has an assistant assistant coach who's a woman. I love the fact that there's a woman on the staff. I don't see a problem with it. I'm certainly not trying to make a controversy or anything, but I wanted to take light of it. I think it's a great move, and I love the reason behind it. It's just so organic and terrific. Also, thanks to Jared and others in the sports information staff at Bethel for their assistance as well. Going to take a break. When we come, or not take a break, we're going to go off the air. When we come back on Sunday, remember we're talking primarily Northeast, Atlantic, South, and Central regions, and the WBCA Center Court. I know we didn't have the NABC Coaches Corner tonight. We will work on getting one for Thursday. We have some ideas for down the road. We just needed a little bit more time. Couldn't execute it this week, though. You could argue Coach Novak or Coach Miller from any of the men's coaches tonight were great NABC Coaches Corner type segments. All right, so that does it for us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We're going to sign off. Thank you. If you got any questions for us, and don't forget about the Hoopsville mailbag, email us, hoopsville@d3hoops.com. Follow us on Twitter, @D3Hoopsville and #Hoopsville. Follow us on Instagram the same way, @D3Hoopsville and #Hoopsville. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Hoopsville as well. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in there And hope you enjoyed the show. If you missed the show live, don't forget, or missed any parts of the show live, don't forget you can watch it on demand or listen to the podcast on SoundCloud or iTunes. And if you happen to be listening to the podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes, I hope it is a good experience for you. And thank you for taking the time. That's it for us. Thanks very much for tuning in. Again, thanks to D3Hoops.com. The WBCA and the NABC will be back on Sunday evening, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Good night, everybody.